So throughout these screencasts, we have looked at outdoor air pollution. In this final segment, we are going to compare indoor and outdoor air pollution because indoor air pollution can be significant. And we'll also look at how developing countries and developed countries each have their own but separate issues with indoor air pollution. So first, let's look at some of the typical causes of indoor air pollutants, in this case particularly in developing countries, but some of this can happen in developed countries as well. So when wood, animal manure, or coal is used for cooking and heating in developed countries, and if there is not sufficient indoor ventilation, it can lead to carbon monoxide poisoning. So carbon monoxide, which is released from the burning of any of these fuels for cooking or heating, can produce carbon monoxide, which can build up indoors and increase also the particulates in the air. This leads to an increased risk for respiratory diseases such as infections and even cancer. Part of the issue is that in some very poor developing countries, there may be one window or not a window at all in the home structure, or if the home structure is something like a tent or a yurt, again, there may not be sufficient ventilation, and so this is of concern and something that's being addressed by many global health organizations. Developed countries can also have carbon monoxide, but I will talk about that a little later. So now we're looking at developed countries like the United States. In the United States, we are spending more time inside, and certainly COVID-19 hasn't probably helped with that. Many people, if you think about your day, how many hours did you spend outdoors versus indoors today? Some people who work maybe in construction or some field like that may be outdoors a lot. Or if you're traveling to work, you get out of the house, even though you then go into another building. But generally speaking, people are spending a lot of time inside a home or even just inside a vehicle like your car. To make matters worse, to compound the situation, we have houses that are sealed more tightly for the purpose of better insulation, and that too keeps any pollutants indoors. And so the more time we spend indoors with our buildings that are well insulated, we increase the exposure to a number of indoor air pollutants, which we'll discuss here. The first is asbestos. Asbestos is mineral fiber that was used for insulation in older buildings. Now, if it's still in a tile, for example, a floor tile in an older building, or if it's in insulation inside a wall, you're not going to breathe it in, which is the problem with asbestos. But if you plan to do any type of renovation, then it needs to be removed by professionals who wear special gear so they don't inhale these fibers. Inhaling these fibers can lead to scarring of the lung tissue and even cancer. A second indoor air pollutant is carbon monoxide, just as you saw for the developing countries. In this case, when you have natural gas or wood stoves in your home, they may, if the system is not functioning properly, if there's a malfunction or a blockage to the vent, then CO2 can be released from these systems. Carbon monoxide may be released from these systems. And carbon monoxide is odorless, so people don't know that it's coming into their home. Natural gas is also odorless, but the gas companies add a smell to it. So if there's a leak of natural gas in your system, you will be able to detect that at very small quantities due to this very strong odor that they add to it. But that's not true of carbon monoxide. So in any home that has either a natural gas or a wood stove, then CO2 carbon monoxide detectors should be installed, and they should be installed at each level of the home. They are a little pricey, maybe $25 from your basic home improvement store, but if that is an issue, a financial issue for you, many times fire departments are very happy to provide one for you because they would much rather get the call that the alarm went off and no one was injured. Okay, and another problem with carbon monoxide is that the vents needs to be up higher than any snowfall that we might get. So, for instance, there was a case in Plymouth a few years back where there was more snow than the height of the vent, and the snow blocked the venting of the carbon monoxide. And in fact, if I recall correctly, it was even a firefighter's family that died as a result of that. So please take that seriously. Okay, a third indoor air pollutant is radon. Radon is a radioactive gas, and it's found naturally in rocks in the soil in certain parts of the country, and it can migrate into homes, particularly cellars, which are in contact with the soil or the rocks around it. And we happen to live in an area of the country that does have radon. And so if you are concerned, again, you can buy a radon detector from your local home improvement store. And if you go to sell a home, it's required that there's a test for radon done first. If radon is detected, there is a barrier that can be put up along your walls of your basement that prevent radon from entering your home. Okay, a fourth indoor air pollutants are VOCs, volatile organic compounds. Many products that we have in our homes or our work garages and so forth give off fumes, solvent fumes, and those fumes can be harmful to people. So let's go through a few examples. One is building materials. If you recall, back in 2016, a company called Lumber Liquidators had wood flooring material that had formaldehyde in it. And when this was installed, the formaldehyde led to people feeling dizzy. Even worse than dizziness, it has been shown that formaldehyde can cause cancer. And actually, back at the time, I had a student in this class that worked as a flooring installer, and he had gotten sick from installing this flooring. So anyway, that has been banned. Lumber Liquidators was required to remove this product and not sell it anymore. I have noticed recently they've come back with a different company name. I believe it's LL or something like that instead of Lumber Liquidators. I don't know, but that probably might have been related to the cost. There were probably lawsuits, I'm sure, regarding this product. Plastics can also give off VOCs, fabrics, and carpets. Fabrics, if you've ever bought clothing from, let's say, Target, sometimes those are sprayed with certain chemicals such as pesticides and other chemicals to prevent the fabric from being deteriorated by pests as it travels from, say, China to the United States. So highly, I recommend, if you have bought something and you notice it has a funny odor, or even if it doesn't, put it through the wash once before you wear it. Carpets can also contain VOCs. A number of years ago, the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, installed new carpets and suddenly had people in their building getting sick, and they traced it back to find out it was actually the new carpets that were causing people to feel ill. which leads me to this final term here, sick building syndrome. So sick building syndrome is when a higher than normal number of individuals who are occupying or working in a particular building experience symptoms, such as things like perhaps headaches or dizziness, or their throat feeling tight, like it was closing, or chemical sensitivity, any of these types of things. And when this happens, investigators come in to determine what is causing that. So I would like to give you a couple of examples of times when there have been sick buildings. It has been investigated and determined what it was. Okay, I've mentioned the EPA already. One I haven't mentioned is there was a hospital in Boston, and it actually happened in more than one hospital. But in this hospital, a large number of nurses became ill. And they weren't sure what was wrong with them, but they were too ill to come to work. They would get better, return to work, and then get ill again. And they noticed that these illnesses were only taking place in certain departments. So they looked carefully at those departments to see what it was that was causing it. And it turned out to be latex. When you have gloves, the exam gloves used to be made of latex, and you take them off, they snap them off when they're done, there are particles of latex that fly into the air, and these were breathed in and eventually led to an allergy, to latex. They also found that there were cleaning products that they were applying to, say, a plasticized bed, to, let's say, a surgical center. And they would spray these chemicals on there and then wipe it down to sanitize it. Unfortunately, when they were spraying, those particles, those chemicals also entered the air. So people who worked in a surgical center, for example, may have been exposed to both latex and the chemicals in the cleaning products, and led them to have these allergies and these chemical sensitivities. So they implemented changes. It was very expensive, but they took out all of the latex gloves and destroyed them at great cost. They changed the cleaning agents to, well, it was the same or sometimes different cleaning agents, but then they were applied, instead of spraying them through the air, in the air, they were used rags or materials, cloths rather, to dampen the cloth with this cleaning product and then cleaning the beds, and that seems to have resolved the issue. Okay, one last thing I do want to touch on as an example. Oh gosh, if I have time, two things. One is that some agents that cause illness are either bacterial or caused by another microorganism. So I'll tell you, I guess, briefly about the story of the Legionnaires. The Legionnaires are a civic group, and they held a convention in Philadelphia some time ago, actually decades ago at this point. And when they returned, and it turns out there was a bacteria, now called Legionella, that was in the air conditioning venting and was spreading to the people who attended this convention. No one got sick at the time, but when they came home, several people began to die. And in one particular town where an individual came home, he went to the ER and it was declared that he died from a heart attack. And then his doctor thought that was odd. He had a family doctor. He thought it was odd because the man was young and had no history of heart disease. The next day, another one of his patients turned up in the hospital and died, again called a heart attack. And then a few days later, a third one died. And again, this doctor, being a family doctor, knew that all three of these patients had attended the same convention, and he contacted the CDC, which found out that indeed a number of individuals across the country had contracted this illness and were either sickened or died. and there were thousands of people at this convention. It's still present